Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Jones, and you are watching Let's Talk. As you know, we're in the midst of COVID-19. We're supposedly, as they said a few months ago, at the plateau or the peak
Mhm.
of
That's what they say.
COVID-19. That's what they say.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure exactly where we're going to be in the next couple of weeks, especially with, I'm concerned because of the I think the way that they're opening places, opening restaurants, opening beaches, opening hair salons. It's I think we're just moving too quickly, and that
Mhm.
we are trying to resume with business as usual when we are definitely not in a business as usual time. And you, of course, know about that better than I do. And I, again, want to appreciate you for coming on, talking to us. You are a COVID-19 survivor.
Mhm.
And I am so,
Thank God.
so happy that you are walking, living, breathing, moving miracle, and that
Amen.
you are here to tell your story and to share with us some insights. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling better, much better than I was. So, like you said, I believe I don't know about walking, talking, living, but I certainly am a miracle product of God's grace. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad to be here and grateful to be alive, feeling stronger. I'm back to work after being out for 2 months. I'm back to work, and so I'm
Mm.
feeling pretty good.
Very good, very good. So let me go back for a second. When did you know that you had contracted the virus COVID-19?
Okay, so let me kind of give you a quick snapshot of
Sure.
time frame, if that'll
Okay.
help. So I was over in Montevideo for 2 weeks teaching for my company, and then 2 weeks in Montevideo, and then 1 week we went over to Santiago,
Montevideo is in Chile.
Chile, in
Okay.
Chile.
Hmm.
So I was there teaching, and then I went over to Santiago for a week, and then began teaching there. Um, and then we started getting this heightened security risk, and the government started shutting down different places. Kind of, I was supposed to actually go um, to Asia first. I was supposed to be in
Mm.
Narita, Tokyo, and Seoul, Korea, teaching the same class for inclusion and diversity there. And because of the heightened number of cases that was happening in Asia, we put Asia on postponement, and they sent me to Chile.
Okay.
So got to Chile, Montevideo, taught for 2 weeks, went to Chile, Santiago, and taught for a week, and then numbers started rising, and Europe was shutting down, and so the company made a decision to get all of the facilitators and trainers back into the States just for our safety and protection. So on March 12th, that was our ride home back to the States, and was feeling like just sniffles,
Mm.
nose running, blowing my nose, a lot of that, but not um, any other major symptoms, just sniffles.
Okay.
So I got home that Friday and decided to quarantine. Friday morning, the 13th, and over that weekend, it kind of hit me like a Mack truck. Like every symptom that you could possibly think of:
Mm.
high fever, sweats, chills, aches, soreness from the crown of my head to the sole of my feet, just kind of just aching all over. Couldn't walk up the stairs. I live in a two floor house and couldn't make it to the second floor. Had to sleep
Mm.
downstairs. Had to constantly change my clothes because of the sweating and perspiration. So decided that Monday morning I would give my doctor a call and try and get into my doctor's. That was the morning of the 13th. Morning of the 13th, the doctor wasn't available. Go to urgent care. Go to urgent care. I drive myself there. Could barely make it to
You
urgent
drove
care.
yourself there.
Could barely make it to urgent care.
Oh my goodness.
So I got to urgent care on the 13th, and then they said, well, let's test you for the flu. So they tested me for the flu. 15 minutes later, no flu. Hey, you've been traveling out of the country. You work for an airline. Let's go ahead and test you for COVID. But there's some procedures that we have to go through before we can test you. Again, remember, this is the early part of March.
Right.
So really, they don't know what's going on, and they
Exactly.
were
Still
giving.
not a lot of information.
There you go. So there was a lot of steps you had to go through before you could even test someone. You had to give a
Wow.
call up to the health department and get the okay, and then they would walk you through procedures of what you had to do. So they went through all that, and about 15 minutes later, they came in and began to test me for the COVID, both nostrils, inside my mouth, and then said, go home, 5 or 6 days, we'll give you a call with the test results. Literally the next day, the Health and Human Services called me. That was the morning of the 13th. No, excuse me, the morning of the 16th. That was that Monday, the 16th.
Yes.
And said, hey, listen, Tuesday, the 17th, I'm sorry. Tested on the 16th. They called me the next day, Tuesday, the 17th. You tested positive for COVID-19, 14-day quarantine. And at that time, there was this major list of qualifications a list of do's and do nots.
Yes.
And one of the lists on that list of do's and do nots is if you left and were caught outside of your home, you could actually be imprisoned for 2 years.
Really? I didn't know this.
Yes, if you left quarantine and were caught outside, you could literally be prosecuted and imprisoned for up to 2 years. I can send you the documentation, Mike, so you'll just have it for your records.
Yes.
So when people are referencing, this is when it's first, was hitting the United States heavily, or not even heavily, because I think when I came home on the 12th, there was less than 300 cases in the United States.
Right. So over, of course, where you were, maybe there were more cases.
No, less.
No, less. Right.
Chile,
right.
Chile was not high. No, not at that time.
Right.
Now South America is huge. Brazil, Chile, it is right up there with Brazil now. But it wasn't when I was there 2 months ago.
Right. But you had been in Europe prior to going to Chile.
No, not yet.
Okay.
No, I was supposed to go to Asia, but they canceled and sent me to South America.
Gotcha.
So, but I had other teammates that were in Europe, London, Paris. We were all over the globe teaching.
Right.
So anyway, so they sent me this paperwork. I stayed in the house Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, I could not breathe. I couldn't walk. I was literally leaning over my sink, trying to kitchen sink, throwing water in my mouth, just trying to get oxygen. So it was time to go to the emergency room. So Thursday, I went to the emergency room. My fever was 103.5.
You didn't drive yourself again?
Yes, I did. I drove myself because at this time, I knew I was positive. So I couldn't risk someone else taking.
Okay, yes. I didn't think about that because you didn't want to risk
my daughter
being in.
Correct. My daughter, my friends, and if they got in the car with me, they could potentially. So I had to drive myself. So literally, half breathing, I drove myself to the emergency room and got to the hospital here, and they admitted me. My oxygen levels at that time were 90% and dropping, and 104 fever by this time.
Yes.
So they admitted me, and then Sunday, that was Thursday. By the time Sunday, I was going to the ICU. Called my family and said, I think we're going to have to intubate him, sedate him, and put him on a ventilator. And that was Sunday, the 22nd, which happened to be my daughter's 24th birthday.
Wow.
So just imagine all that going on with my daughter. Never. My daughter was hysterical. My sister and my brothers were hysterical. And think of just the isolation.
Yes.
So you're in the hospital, and normally you would have your family trying to come and make sure you're okay, and you just got support there physically. No one. So stayed in ICU for 4 days, and then downgraded to a regular room for the next 2 days, and then released on the 26th. And came home. I could barely walk even when I came home. So long story short, that's kind of the timeline of everything happening. I stayed home from March 26th until May 19th. That was my first day back to work.
Wow. So in between, and thank you, Teddy, for being so descriptive and detailed, because I think it's important that people know that, how quickly this virus progresses. And how quickly you were, trying to, as you said, dousing water as you're leaning over the kitchen sink, trying to get oxygen from the water, But I think it's important for people to understand that these are like serious times. And, I just want to ask you in terms of what you're thinking, because I'm sure you had lots of time to think about how this impacted you, your family and your friends, and even maybe you had some anxiety with
Mm-hmm.
going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel your company has protected you in terms of someone who's had COVID-19 and now you're back in the workforce and you're not just an average Joe. You're in a very important
Mm-hmm.
position. So
Okay.
how do you feel that? Do you feel that your company has set measures in place to prevent this from happening again, or what are your thoughts?
Um, so I'm in I'll just be honest with you. So you talked for a few minutes, or you were mentioning just the mental stuff that you go through, or the anxieties, right? So I was out of work for 2 months, a little over 2 months, like maybe close to 9 weeks. And during that time, the company, through the CARES Act, could afford you 14 days because that's considered the quarantine days.
Right.
And the company's supposed to guarantee you with pay and everything and make sure you're covered and you don't lose your job, right, during that 14 days. Well, the way it works for the company that I work for, which is union contracted, I work for an airline. So
Mhm.
the airline employees, especially in my department, which is flight services, which is technically I'm still a flight attendant. I'm loaned out to the training and development and inclusion and diversity department to help facilitate training abroad the entire company.
Gotcha.
Um, so but my position is still under union contracted as a flight attendant,
Mm,
which means you're only paid when you fly or when you have a work schedule,
I see.
right? So the 14 days that they were covering me, I had no flight schedule or no training classes scheduled. So those 14 days, although the company said they paid me, there was no pay.
Oh my goodness. No pay
So,
for 14 days.
well, that was the 14 days that they said they were going to cover me,
Right.
but I was not paid at all for the month of April and May.
Oh my goodness.
From April 1st to May 16th, unless I had scheduled work duties, and sometime in May I did have a few and maybe a few hours in April that was scheduled. So they had to cover those scheduled hours. But literally maybe 17 hours in April I was paid for the whole entire month. And maybe May, I just went back to work on the 19th. So now I'm back on the pay. But from the 1st to the 19th, no pay.
Yeah.
So
So in the midst of you dealing with COVID-19 and trying to regain your strength and God forbid, you didn't know what was going to happen, right? You were in
right,
a we were talking before, you don't, you could have been one of the numbers of the 100,000 people, but
correct,
thank God you're not. That you're here for a reason.
right.
You're definitely here for a purpose. And so, like, how did that make you feel? Not knowing that you're not getting paid for that time, and you're
Well,
dealing with this.
very unsupported. Like the
Yeah.
company, I didn't feel like the company cared, and I'm a company advocate.
Yes.
Like the training assignments, or I'm very strategic in terms of what I'll lend my voice to within
Mhm.
the organization, within the
Right.
company, right? So I'm sure about, hey, can you help facilitate these classes? And I'm like, what are we doing and what's the purpose of this and why are
Right.
we rolling this out? So I'm very strategic. So I've always been pro company.
Yes.
And I just have a different look or different take because it wasn't just the physical stuff you were going through. Like I literally went through 4 weeks of counseling for
Yes.
post-traumatic
I was
stress
going to
syndrome.
ask you about that in terms of your psychological and your emotional and your mental state. That you definitely would have to have someone to talk to professionally about this.
Mhm. Yeah, because once a lot of people tend to think that, once you're discharged from the hospital after COVID, that's it. you're back to normal. Like, hey, you survived it, you made it through. But you just imagine 2 months of isolation with no support from anyone around. You get back home, and when I got home, the only reason why I was discharged is because I was no longer critical, and they needed bed space.
Wow.
So I went home still unable to walk. I could barely walk outside to my mailbox.
Yeah, you were
I could
still weak. You were still,
Yes,
yeah,
still
infected.
struggling, still suffering because I was still my lungs were impacted so much from the virus and from
Yeah.
the small case of pneumonia. So my lungs were impacted. Thank God there were no underlying, you know, uh, complications that contributed to it. So thank God I was able to my body was kind of able to fight it, and it wasn't impacted to the point of ventilation.
Mm.
But the mental stuff that you go through afterwards, I was coming home. After coming home, I was waking up in the middle of the night, like
Mhm.
thinking that I was still attached to tubes, and tubes were everywhere, and I was still in the
Yeah.
hospital and still sweating and couldn't find a nurse, and I had to like talk myself down, like, no, you're home, you're okay,
Yeah.
everything is fine, you're not in the hospital anymore. So there's
Mm.
so much mental stuff that you go through behind it, the isolation, being
Yes.
alone, right? And then you turn on the TV and the numbers are continuing to rise of people who lost their very life to the same thing that you survived.
Yes.
So you got
Yes.
that survivor's remorse going on,
Yes.
right?
Yes. I
Yeah,
was
so
gonna ask you about that.
you got
Yeah.
survivor's remorse going on as well. So I felt like the company kind of let me down because I felt like, if anything, I applied for workers' compensation and the company fought that. So, like, well, I was at work. Like, the only reason why I was in Chile was because I was working. So,
Yes. Yes.
and they were like, well, you have not documented proof to show that you contracted this while at work. And I'm like, well, I was in Chile working. I wasn't sick before I went, and I got sick the day that I came home. The
Right.
symptoms were already prevailing. So I didn't catch it in the United States, or I didn't catch it on the plane. And then the next morning I'm, at the hospital. So
Right.
so I felt some type of way about that as well. And then, I had been contributing to a critical illness plan. You get those extra, you have certain healthcare plans under your healthcare benefits, and then you can get additional ones. So
Yeah.
I had like 3 years been paying into a critical illness in case anything ever happens, you have to be hospitalized or anything like that. And they fought me on that, saying
Oh,
that COVID-19 was not a listed disease. Of course it wasn't. It just it
it
just
just
came
came.
here,
Yes, exactly. So how could it
but
be listed?
so
Oh
I
my
feel
goodness.
some kind of way. I feel very unsupported by my company as it relates to that, but I feel so blessed and fortunate and so well supported by my family and my church.
Like, how do you protect yourself now going out, knowing that you had COVID-19?
Everywhere I go, I have on gloves. I have on mask. As soon as I walk out of my front door in my car, I have on gloves. I have on a mask. I have sanitizer and wipes in my car. When I come back in, as soon as I come out, I'm a 6 feet distance. I don't care if you have on a mask. I'm still 6 feet away from you. If
Good.
somebody's coming down the grocery aisle and they come in my direction, I see that I can't get down the aisle safely without coming in close proximity, I'm going to go down another aisle. Or and when I come home, I undress in my garage. So I have a change of clothes in my garage, and I will take off everything, spray it down, wipe it down, go directly upstairs, drop it in the laundry, and go straight to the shower every time I come in. Because that's what I realized. Now I've tested negative twice since being home and before going back to work.
Good.
So
Good.
2 weeks ago, I tested negative twice. So I realized that whatever I was doing in this 2 months' time to stay negative has been working. So that's what I've been doing. I mean, protecting myself because I don't know who does have it, and they don't know if they have it. If
Exactly.
they're
That's
asymptomatic,
uh,
so the only thing you can do is make sure you're good. And I can't judge anyone's household and what they need. Some people need to get out. That's okay. Some people need to fly. That's okay. Because sometimes when you think like, why is anybody on this plane? Like why is this plane at capacity? Because literally only I worked like maybe 9, 10 flights over 6-day period. And literally all of them except one was packed to capacity. All of them. And one of them had maybe like 46 out of 177 seats. So
Oh,
I can't judge those people because I don't know why people traveling. It could be a doctor going somewhere. It could be somebody just going to hang out with their mom and their boyfriends. I saw a group of kids that were going down to Fort Lauderdale. I know they were going to the beach, and I had to constantly tell them on the plane, put your mask on, put your
yeah,
mask on, put your mask on. It's not just for you. And I'm all right. No, I know you're all right, but the people around you may not be okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
for you and for the person around you, you need to wear a mask.
I'm sure you have a different perspective and a different outlook as it relates to someone who survived COVID-19, who you thought that you weren't going to survive at one point. Like you said, March 22nd, you didn't think you were going to make it.
Right.
But what is your perspective now?
I think I'm learning to adjust to a new norm. I
Yes,
don't think we're gonna ever go back to the way we were.
the new
I think
normal. So the next 5 months, what does your new normal look like?
just making sure I'm protected and making sure that I'm careful. Um, I can't tell you the last time I've now shaken someone's hand. And I'm a hugger. Like I'm very touchy feely. I'm hands on.
Mhm.
Like if I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching and somebody's asking a question, it's nothing for me to go and put my hand on their shoulder and talk directly in their face and say, "Oh my God, you got it," or something like that. But or while I'm teaching, I'm very robotic. So I'm around the room. I'll work the entire room. I work the crowd.
Mm,
That's kind of what I do. But even that's got to change. We're looking at how do we reformat many of the face-to-face classes to online learning modules now. So that's going to be something different because we're going to put away. Before we would have classes of maybe 76, 130 flight attendants coming through. Now we're having classes that may start at 76 in a big body and then we break them down. The new norm could also be after September 20th and that bailout that many of these airlines have taken, there's going to be probably some major furloughs.
yes.
So who knows because we're looking at staffing now, right? So all of the airlines are looking at staffing ratios
Mm,
because people tend to think that the people that are hit within an airline are the flight attendants and the pilots and the ground crew. But if you don't have flights flying and you don't have, we had 22,000 flight attendants, right? That now we're down to, I think, 13,000 took the leave of absence or an early retirement. And we're still looking at downsizing numbers for flight attendants. So if flights are not going out and we don't have the staffing ratios that we did, we don't need that many people in HR. We don't need that many people in IT because people are not at work using computers. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so it's not just the front line, but it's the back office that's also impacted. So staffing ratios are going to go down. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people impacted by furloughs. I'm looking at jobs, looking for jobs. So I've been like just trying to spice up my resume. Like, okay, so I was in the
Yeah.
hospitality industry and training and development for 25 years in corporate America, and then took an early retirement, moved to North Carolina, and I was in banking for 25 years and decided, wait, maybe it's a shift back to banking. If something happens with the airline, do I go back to banking? Do I go back to teaching? So just trying to make sure I'm one, healthy, and making sure that I'm prepared.
I think it's going to take us about 2 to 3 years to recover from this, and before they can get a handle on a vaccine that's going to, like the flu, when the flu
Right,
came on the scene, and we
right,
can talk about H1N1, SARS,
right,
all the other viruses that
right.
come before
Right.
coronavirus. It's going to take some time for them to get a handle on this and to be able to control it and know
Yeah,
more information about it, because as you said,
right.
they didn't have a lot of information 2 months ago, and we are still
Correct.
gathering information
Correct.
because it seems that it's impacting people differently.
Yeah, and if you look at the effects of 9/11 on the airline industry,
Yep.
it took about 2 years for them to kind of like get back on their feet again, the airline industry. and people flying again and feeling comfortable, because you can say we're flying again and our routes are back open, but you still have to deal with the mentality of the people who are saying, I'm not getting on an airplane. It's not comfortable. Or let the first 10,000 people try it first, and then I'll think about going from Charlotte to Raleigh.
Yes.
But I'm not going from New York to LA. I'm not getting on the plane for 5 hours. So I mean, we're gearing up and trying to look at staffing ratios. We're trying to look at, who's going to be where and what's going to be. There's a lot going on, but just a
But you
lot.
have your life ahead of you now, so
Absolutely.
that's the most important thing. You have your life, and you're breathing.
There's a saying in the church that says millions didn't make it, but I was one of the ones that did.
Yes. Let's see who sings that song. The Winans brothers.
Yes, sir. The Winans.
Sing that
yes,
song.
Sir.
Millions didn't make it, but
one of the ones that did.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more educational news, exclusive interviews, and more.